Michael, my friend, my brother, how are you today?
I'm well, Mo. How you doing?
I am doing well.
Good,
There's so
good.
much to talk about, and I don't necessarily want to entertain all the Jeffrey Epstein distractions, but it's a part of the larger picture of what's happening on Capitol Hill, where everything is still connected to Jeffrey Epstein on some level. Either it's the discharge petition or it is the response by the Trump administration trying to point fingers at Bill Clinton, or you had JB Pritzker talking about the concern of whether Trump would try to take us to war to distract us from it. What was your takeaway from the week around all things Epstein?
Well, I think that it's fascinating because it made you look at the shutdown through a perspective that I think we probably discussed here, which is that Trump was in no hurry to end this shutdown because he knew that at the end of the shutdown, and this is not typical of all presidents, I think every president wants to protect themselves. I don't think they would all shut the government down so as to delay the release of something that they knew would not be favorable for them. But I think that everything around this shutdown, as far as Trump was concerned, was about the Epstein files. I think that
Mm-hmm.
making sure that Alita Grijalva was not sworn in was Mike Johnson doing the bidding of Donald Trump. I think that it cannot be ignored. So would he take us to war to do that? I wouldn't put very much past this president. He just shut the government down for it. That said, Republicans are not happy about Epstein. And whether it's Donald Trump saying, let's look at the Democrats who were involved with Epstein, that doesn't absolve him of blame. He's also the president of the United States. So I think as it gets injected into every conversation, it's not just Democrats who don't like Trump who are talking about Epstein. It's Republicans, and it's Republican rank and file. And I have to tell you, having spent a lot of time in the field talking to MAGA voters, it's MAGA voters who said, well, if we find out the Epstein stuff is true, even for us, that would be a bit too far. And that's more than just anecdotal. That is, those are dozens and dozens and dozens of voters who said that same thing to me in different ways.
What if you were, and this is a hypothetical, but if you were a Republican member of Congress right now, and heretofore you have
That's not
toed the line,
hypothetical.
huh?
That's not hypothetical. No. I'm a Republican member of Congress.
And you hew very closely to the line of all things Trump and whatever Trump has done and said you have supported. What is your political calculus right now as far as managing and maneuvering this very dangerous Jeffrey Epstein thing, which could implicate the president, but more importantly, could possibly put you in a very precarious position as a Republican member of Congress?
I think it's very easy to use the rhetoric as a politician of saying how distasteful you find it, how repugnant it is, and how you would hold Trump responsible for it if it turns out true, without actually leaving the platform in totality. The other thing that we're going to find out right now is that Congress is made up of 535 very, very ambitious people. And some of them want to be president, and some of them who are Republican want to be president. And as time goes on, whether it's about Epstein or other things, there are going to be people from his own party who are going to try and differentiate themselves from him, from MAGA, if they find that, especially in 2026, if Trump voters don't show up when he's not on the ballot, it's going to be a lot easier for these Republicans to go against Trump. So on issues of Epstein, it's a no-brainer. I mean, many presidents would say yes, would give you the go-ahead to criticize me on this because we need to keep this majority. So criticizing him while also saying you're going to vote with what the White House's priorities are for a Republican, that seems okay.
Given the SCOTUS ruling on presidential immunity, I'm willing to believe that this president is not concerned about actual consequences coming out of the Jeffrey Epstein revelations or emails or anything which should come out of the files. But if you were Donald Trump, in the best way that you could characterize what you may think this president is thinking, what is the worst case scenario for him, and what is the best case scenario for him to get through this?
I mean, the best case scenario is the best case scenario that he's been able to get through every single, and I'm answering the second part first, is that he's been able to get through everything, that he's been impermeable to any kind of scandal. He's a man who's been impeached twice. He's been convicted in court. He has lost a presidential election, come back and won another one. I mean, this is somebody who we used to call Reagan the Teflon president. Nothing sticks to this guy. And if it does stick to him, he wears it as a badge of honor, and that is a very, very different way than we've seen politicians work in American history. It used to really hurt a president or any politician or anyone you may know in life if they've done something that is either illegal or distasteful. And with this guy, it just almost keeps bolstering him. He's able to paint himself as a victim. Now, the worst case scenario for him is that if he starts to lose control and MAGA loses control as a movement, Trump out of office with low popularity in 2028, 2029, returns him to a place where he could be a target of law. And if he doesn't have the support back that he got after his last loss, then it's going to be very, very difficult for him, especially if the Justice Department falls into other hands. So I think that, should Democrats win in 28, and there's we're getting way ahead of ourselves. He hasn't even been president for a year in this second term. But if that were to happen, then he becomes a target of the law. And I think the worst case scenario for Donald Trump is always jail, right? Is always having to answer, and also to see that a lot of his finances crumble.
We know that in his response thus far, the president has called for investigations into Bill Clinton, specifically related to Jeffrey Epstein, which I thought was odd because you are further promoting the Epstein story being covered in the news. And we know that not only were you friends with Epstein, you were friends with Clinton. I see this as a bluff. He doesn't actually want an investigation into Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton conceivably could say, yes, put me on trial and I'll talk about the times that I saw Donald as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't know that it's a bluff. I think whenever Donald Trump loves whataboutisms, right? I mean, he loves saying, "Hey, but that guy did it too," or she did it, or how come they got away with it and I can't get away with it? Look, it's not great for the Clinton legacy, but Bill Clinton is an older man who is no longer president anymore. And Donald Trump is an older man who is now president. And I always think that the foibles of a sitting president are worse than anything one of his predecessors may or may not have done. And, Bill Clinton also hasn't spent a great deal of time denying anything. He hasn't had to answer for it in such a way. And Donald Trump has lied at every turn about it. And I think that's different. I'm not excusing any of it. And this is a bad guy. And I don't know the depths of his, how horrible people knew he was at the time. I just simply don't know that. But I know that for a sitting president to have that association is poisonous.
Also, we know that just a day or so ago, we have recently reopened the government, but it seems like the shutdown was 4 months ago in terms of a news cycle. Is there any lasting impact of the shutdown just politically? We know it's still, there's a lasting impact for Americans who haven't been fully reinstated as far as their jobs or what have you, SNAP benefits. But as far as politically, are there any lasting effects?
I think that here's the thing. I think that what the lasting effects of this are that it sets the table for 2026. While Democrats are frustrated that their party kind of ended the shutdown by crossing over and voting with Republicans, they did get an intangible out of this, which is they were the ones who shut the government down ostensibly about health care. They knew they weren't going to get any concessions from the Republicans, but they didn't get any concessions from Republicans. And Republicans are going to have to answer for that, either with a healthcare plan of their own, which they've never been able to come up with. They voted down Obamacare. God, it had to have been over 50 or 60 times in the Senate, and yet they never had a kind of a counter to it. They didn't have their plan to fix healthcare. They don't have one now. So in 2026, the Democrats are still going to be able to say that they are the party that wants to protect your health care, that wants to protect these subsidies. And that's valuable. That's super valuable. That's valuable in states where Democrats don't run well as well. You look at a state like Florida. You look at a state like Arizona, where they've had, middling success. I mean, they do have senators and they do have the governor there, but presidentially, it's been up and down for Democrats there. I think this is very, very important stuff. I know there are Democrats that are frustrated and angry and think that it was a party that bent, but I don't think it was all lost for Democrats, and I
Mhm.
don't think that it was all won for Republicans. I think Republicans have to find an answer on healthcare, because if not, they're going to get stung by it, especially with Trump not on the ballot.
In a political sense, we have to be able to walk and chew gum. It's not just the domestic issues, but the international issues. Some of them are being used as a way of to distract from the domestic issues. We know that another fisherman's boat was destroyed, I believe, last night. Another four people were killed under the guise of protecting America and America's interests from the flow of drugs. I'm personally surprised that this hasn't been more of an issue for the Trump administration, not pushing aside the Epstein scandal, but I'm surprised that this hasn't provided more pressure against the administration, given what seems to be international lawlessness. Now, from where you sit, is this something which could also be a serious issue of contention for the administration?
Insofar as geopolitical issues matter in a political sense in America today, yes, I do. I don't think it's going to have staying power and lasting power. I think that, especially a president who ran as an America firster, so much of it became about the domestic issues. So much of it, so much of our politics right now is based on how much a carton of eggs costs, for whatever reason. It won't remain that way forever. But I think when you are worried about the cost of healthcare and a carton of eggs, Venezuela is not the pressing issue that a lot of people want it to be. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. I'm just saying that that's the political reality, at least for now. Ukraine withstood a battering last night over the last 2 days, and these are wars that the president said would end within moments of his taking the presidency. So those issues are not going to go away, and a president does. Every president has done it. It knows no party or no personality. They do look overseas when things are not good at home. But this is a president who promised more at home. This is a party that promised more at home, and that's really going to be the political reality. I don't think it's going to be about hitting Venezuela, even though that does feel like a distraction, even though it does feel like something that is curious in many ways. I don't think it's going to have the political power that other issues do.
Decades ago, strategist, political advisor James Carville famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." So if you're right, Michael Shure, and people are more concerned and more focused on these eggs and groceries and what they call kitchen table issues, and going back to Jeffrey Epstein, because everything is connected to Jeffrey Epstein in some way, we know the president has promised slash floated both at the same time this idea of these $2,000 tariff rebate checks for people. I guess they're going to be in the mail sometime after we get our Doge $5,000 checks. From
Right.
your just conversations, is this something which is gaining traction anywhere? Do people actually believe this?
Well, I mean, yes, I think that people do believe it. Look, I'm never going to doubt the ability of people to believe something that somebody like Donald Trump or a politician will say.
Hmm.
I've seen him on too many stages in too many places in this country and seen people believe everything he says, only to then be disappointed, but not to air that disappointment, save for maybe some farmers who were, a little ticked off about tariffs a couple of, back in 18 and then again now. I just think that the issue of trying to buy these votes becomes transparent. And I do think, everybody always says, well, Trump is on the ballot. When Trump is not on the ballot, it makes a big difference when his name is not on there. And I think whatever he tries to do, what the Republicans are selling doesn't have as many buyers as what the Democrats are trying to undo right now. And until that changes, I don't think any of these sort of political trickery is going to have an impact.
one thing I've noticed, and I don't understand as someone who's followed this for many years and decades, is how and why the Trump administration is all over the map. I mean that literally. On one hand, you say it's America first, how they want to improve the economic prospectus here in the US, and at the same time, $40 billion goes out the door to Argentina. And the president is also touting uh, buying Argentinian beef at a discount, much to the detriment of American suppliers. How is it that this cognitive dissonance doesn't have more of a negative effect on the Trump administration? It's like they want two things to be true at the same time, even though they're mutually exclusive and diametrically opposed.
Not to mention, Mo, I mean, he also took a bulldozer to the East Room of the White House. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's both symbolic and actual what he's doing in ignoring the country, but he's also attacking the country by attacking a symbol of the country and changing it in his own way. I think what part of, and I think you have to credit them if that's creditable. Part of the success of Trump has been chaos. It's been creating a mess so that the people who are following it, like you and me and like Jane and Joe Voter, can't keep their attention in one place for very long. They're just constantly moving back and forth, and that has proven successful. So once something doesn't go right, once you say, I'm going to build a wall, I'm going to build a wall, and then you don't build a wall, by the time you realize that he didn't build a wall, you're looking at something else. And I think that's what's happening again right now with Trump and with the way this administration is governing, is they just try and sow as much chaos as they can and believe that people will not be able to concentrate on what is bad and really what is good as well, because you don't have that attention span. And until it's not successful, you have to say it's worked for them.
Not to only talk about the Trump administration, I think there are two other conversations I'd like to have with you very briefly before I let you go, Michael Shure. There's also what the Democrats are or are not doing. We have the Democrats who've had some recent election wins, some successes. I was just talking, I don't know if you heard the portion of the conversation, I was talking about Katie Wilson, how she won her mayoral bid in Seattle, and she's openly professed as a socialist. And I was offering some pushback to that. I said, I don't know about the political or conventional wisdom, and I don't know if that's conventional in today's world, but the conventional wisdom of defining yourself or offering yourself as a socialist or democratic socialist. Does that make it more difficult for you as a democratic political candidate to get elected? And I know it's a long form question. Let me ask it like this. Did Katie Wilson make it more difficult for herself? Did Zoran Mamdani make it more difficult for himself by the public proclamations of being a socialist or democratic socialist?
I don't know that they made it more difficult for themselves. They both won. I think they may have made it more difficult for the Democratic Party to distance themselves from the mayors of two very important cities, because they're going to, at some point, they're going to have to. But I think, and I've said this about Zoran Mamdani, is that I think he is far too smart to be dumb. So I don't think he's going to govern in a way that is going to alienate Democrats. I just don't think that's going to happen. And yes, he's going to be labeled, and people who support him are going to be labeled. It's why you saw, you could call it spinelessness, but sometimes it's politically astute to distance yourself from somebody who may seem toxic. Again, Seattle, the mayor of Seattle doesn't hold the same national allure as the mayor of New York does, but I see your point, and there are similarities there. The other thing is that, whether or not it's about their socialism, democratic socialism, it's about going against the establishment. And that is always in vogue at different times throughout history. And it doesn't mean that it's a wave that's going to go against the establishment. It's going to mean that some establishment, some, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats are going to lose because there is a wave like this. So you see a Cuomo, a dynastic family like the Cuomo family upended in New York by somebody who is a kind of a Johnny-come-lately, but a good one and a successful one. But we'll see where it goes. The other thing is, do they hurt themselves? No mayor of New York has ever gone on to higher office. So I don't know how much Mamdani is going to hurt himself here. If he succeeds or exceeds that office, he will be the first to ever do that. And then, then he will have disproven that. But for the most part, these people don't, mayors, especially of New York, I don't know so much about Seattle, mayors of New York don't really have political futures.
Are we looking at the end of Chuck Schumer's career?
Only if he wants it to be. I don't think that anything he did here would the voters of New York are absolutely the last arbiters of that. If he gets a primary challenge from Representative Ocasio-Cortez or anybody else, that could end it. Sure, the ballot box could end it, but I don't think that he has lost hold of the leadership by any means. I think that there are leaders in waiting, and he knows that. But I think it's going to be just sort of the chronology of time that dictates when he leaves. And look, he may stand down from leadership. He certainly wouldn't do it now. And I don't think that he thinks he lost in this last, even though my personal belief that he was behind those votes going to the other side, even though he voted against it. I think that he knew who could get the government back going. And he comfortably thought the Democrats still own health care, which until proven otherwise, they do. And that he thought the time was right to come back, get the Epstein stuff out there and do this. So he found people that were either not running again, like Dick Durbin, or people who were embattled, like John Fetterman, or people who weren't going to run for a couple of years, like the senators in Nevada. So and Gene Shaheen's not running. So I think that it was convenient. I don't know that to be true. I mean, that's hearsay. It's believable because that's the behavior of majority leaders and minority leaders on consequential votes. I don't think it's the end of Chuck Schumer unless he wants it to be. I'm not an alarmist about that. Whatever I think of Chuck Schumer as a leader, I don't think it's the end until he says it is, or until he loses at the ballot box.
These questions, Michael Shure, I appreciate you answering them. These questions, because I've long thought that, especially now, that the future of the Democratic Party is inextricably linked to the politics in New York. I wonder if Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is the future of the Democratic Party. That ties back to New York. I wonder if Chuck Schumer is the future minority leader of the party, or should be minority leader. That's also New York. And I want to juxtapose that to the recent retirement announcement of Nancy Pelosi, how she's not running for office. And I wonder whether that was not a signal to specifically Chuck Schumer about there needs to be a changing of the guard. Am I reading too much into that?
I think probably. I mean, I don't think that I agree with the New York thing, even though two leaders in Congress are from New York. New York is clearly a powerful place. California had the last nominee for president was from California. The Speaker of the House was from California. And, one of the presumed front runners in the 2028 election is the governor of California, who has been, even with the presence of Jeffries and Schumer, has been the number one critic, I would say, nationally of President Trump's. But that notwithstanding, is Hakeem Jeffries the right person? I look, there are people running for office against sitting incumbents, Democrats challenging incumbents in the House next year, who are now pledging that they won't support Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker.
Right.
It seems a curious tactic, because if you are running against somebody, you are going to get Hakeem Jeffries into your district if he's protecting his status as Speaker. And it's also very easy to say that on the campaign trail. Sometimes Nancy Pelosi, because she was such an astute politician, would tell people, say you're not going to support me for Speaker if that helps you. Criticize me if that helps you. Because they know when they get to Washington, there's going to be a lot of pressure to support, to be unanimous behind the Speaker. These are political tactics. And look, you're not getting the soaring oratory and the passion that a lot of Democrats want from people like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. But for the moment, it's capable leadership, and we'll see where it takes them. I know what you're saying, but I don't think the jig is up yet for the New York politicians.
Maybe I've missed it, but it feels like Cory Booker has disappeared off the political landscape, with the exception of his filibuster and 25 hours behind the microphone. It seemed like he has slid into the background. Am I misreading that?
I mean, well, let me. I sort of want to disagree with you. But I know what you're saying. I don't think there's a foreground for a lot of Democrats. And so while as he slipped into the background, perhaps he's one of 100 senators. They've been in a shutdown. That's the problem of being in the minority in Congress, is that you just have no platform. So I don't think that there is really a foreground, except for a governor like Gavin Newsom, who can pick up and go to Brazil and make hay by attending a climate conference because our president isn't, who can get on the airwaves and criticize Donald Trump at every turn, who can put something on the ballot and campaign on it. So while Senator Booker is, we don't hear as much from him now. Without that filibuster, we wouldn't have heard a peep from any of them. So I defy anyone to find anyone who isn't Gavin Newsom right now, or maybe to some extent Pritzker and Westmore in Maryland, who have a loud Democratic voice.
Last question, and not as a curveball, it's just a change in discussion. We also briefly discussed this Gallup poll, how religion no longer important in the majority of U.S. households. That's a part of a larger trend, I think, that has been happening in America. I say this as a Christian, full disclosure. Politically, what does that say about the evolving demographics of voters and how it may help or hurt Democrats, if there's any connection you think you can make there?
Well, here's the thing. I think there's a big difference between a poll saying that it's not as important to translating to the campaign trail where you can minimize religion. So while it may be in decline, and I believe that, I think younger generations are less religious than older generations were and are. But I don't think it's not political currency until you can go out there on the campaign, on the hustings, as it were, and say, oh, these people are so caught up with religion. It's not about religion, right? You still cannot criticize religious people in this country, and I don't think anybody who's watching this or is on this is going to be alive when you can, and so in a sort of widespread way. So it's certainly interesting. It certainly shows that there are ways of influencing the populace that you don't have to tread as carefully. But Republicans are still going to need the Christian vote in order to get the nomination for president. And Democrats are not going to be able to go against, they're not going to be able to over-secularize the country as candidates either. So it's interesting, certainly. It's believable, but I don't know that it translates into politics yet.
Michael Shure, I love having these discussions with you. It's not like the topics that I'm going to bring up, but you're so versatile, so knowledgeable, and so relatable. You just make it easy, it just rolls off your tongue. And I love doing this with you. Usually I get to talk alongside of you, but to actually ask you the questions, it's been a treat while I've been hosting the Mark Thompson Show. Michael, thank you so much for what you do and coming on once again.
All right. Thanks, Mo. Thanks for those words. We'll see you later.
Be well.
Well, quickly, we got one comment from Depressed Canadian here. Do you see this, Mo?
Oh, honestly, will the Oilers... it's brutal. We do, Mo, we've always done 48 seconds of sports here.
Yes. Okay.
And so these are our 48 seconds of sports, and it's a hockey question. I think the Oilers, there are goalies out there. I think they're going to end up with Nashville's goalie and giving up a lot for it. UC Saros would be my guess, is that he's going to go there, Depressed Canadian. But man, they look really flat and really bad, those Oilers, and they do need their creases in jeopardy right now.
I'm never going to root for the Oilers. Go Kings, go.
Okay, there you go. All right. See you later, guys.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.